I've been asked to comment on the recent incident whereby some students at a graduation ceremony in Tobago were debarred from participation, and in fact, from what we are being told, some of them were actually physically removed from the premises, all on the basis of their hairstyle. Now, when one considers what this amounts to, it appears to be some form of discrimination based upon the hairstyle that the students had. We think back in terms of discrimination, and we can go all the way back to the cases from even in the US, where you start off with Brown versus Board of Education, which was a seminal decision of the US Supreme Court, and in fact it was argued by Thurgood Marshall, legendary Supreme Court justice he became, and at the time he was acting for the civil rights movement, whereby they said, look, you can't discriminate against persons because of their skin color and prevent them from participating in the school system. So when you look at the scenario with the hair, it is again a form of discrimination. Our constitution in Trinidad and Tobago provides that you ought not to discriminate against persons based upon these sorts of criteria. And we have had scenarios in the past where, for instance, in the incident last year at Trinity, where students were debarred for their hairstyles, and in fact, I think the Minister of Education had to intervene and the rules had to be codified to say that in such circumstances, students ought not to be penalized or punished for their hairstyles. We think also, even in the USA, where you have had the Crown Act, which had to be implemented to protect persons against discrimination because of the hairstyle that they were carrying. So persons who had natural hair or who wore dreadlocks hairstyles, in some companies in the US, they were actually put under pressure. Some were terminated, some were demoted because of their hairstyle. So you have some states in the US who have now implemented what is known as the Crown Act, which is create a respectful and open workplace for natural hairstyles. So it's actually legislated in the US. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have had examples of persons who have been discriminated against for such. There was the incident with Republic Bank, if one recalls, where they tried to insist that one of their employees must cut his ponytail. And that matter went to the industrial court. It was taken there by the Bank and General Workers Union, and they actually won the matter on behalf of the worker. And it was held that the bank could not insist that the worker must cut his ponytail. We've had this scenario with the worker at Call Fire, who had, hairstyle that the company found offensive. And I think that worker actually took to social media, and there was a public outcry against the policies of the company. So we have had scenarios where this sort of thing has been implemented, but it has been unsuccessful in that the law always favors the freedom of the individual to that type of expression. There was the scenario with the airport's authority where there was an employee with dreadlocks who the airport's authority tried to insist that he must cut his dreadlocks, and he also was successful. There was also a scenario in the prison service where there was a prisoner who, because of his religious beliefs, he had to wear his beard, and as a result, the prison's authority, they lost that matter because it was felt that that was infringing on his rights and discriminating against him. So we have to be very careful in such circumstances as this, where you have school officials imposing their arbitrary standards or their own personal beliefs, whether religious, moral, spiritual, whatever. You are not supposed to impose those beliefs arbitrarily and capriciously on students and their parents and their families to say, well, look, you are insisting on this. And certainly if a child has his hair in cornrows, there's nothing in the law that is objectionable to that. and therefore in those circumstances the students were well within their rights, and it would appear that the school authorities were totally wrong, and particularly if there was any evidence of anybody being physically manhandled as a result, or assaulted, or battered as a result of this incident, they ought to seek legal redress against the school authorities to ensure that this sort of thing never happens again in Trinidad and Tobago.